My name is Gwen Preston. I'm the Vice President of Communications for West Red Lake Gold Mines. West Red Lake is putting the Madsen gold mine, which is in Ontario in Canada, back into production, and we're doing that very, very soon. We just delivered the results of a bulk sample, which was our way of demonstrating, confirming and demonstrating to everybody out there that the approach that we're taking to the Madsen mine is indeed working to unlock the value of this high-grade deposit that has a mine fully built on top of it. And that validation just keeps us on track to get this mine into operation before the middle of the year, which means in the coming weeks. So we're very excited that we've got Madsen where it needs to be. We've been pushing hard for 2 years so that we can deliver new gold production into a gold bull market, and the gold market is certainly playing its part.
Certainly is. Well, like you said you would, and you have. So bulk sample reconciliation, you said it's kind of confirmed your work so far, but what does that actually mean? How has it confirmed what you've been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a mine that it's in Red Lake. People have mined in Red Lake for 100 years. In fact, they're celebrating 100 years of gold mining in Red Lake this summer. 30 million ounces of gold have been pulled out of the rocks of Red Lake. It's not the easiest gold to mine because it's very high grade, but that means it's not, high grade deposits are often not super consistent. So if you want to enjoy the benefits of high grade, you've got to put in the work, which means you have to do a lot of drilling into the deposit to know exactly, to get a really accurate model of where the gold is, so that you make sure that you mine in the right spots. And so that's the work that we've been doing. We got on the ground at Madsen just about 2 years ago. We were underground within a few months, and we've been doing definition drilling since then, since October of 2022. That definition drilling, I mean, we've done 90,000 meters, sorry, October of 2023. We've done 90,000 meters at this point of definition drilling into the deposit that is defined, doing more holes. We're tightening up the drill hole spacing so that we can inform that really accurate model of where the gold is, and then we can design our mine around that and mine effectively. So that's what we've been telling everyone for 2 years will address the problems, which is that, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, Madsen failed under the prior operator who didn't do that definition drill work. And so this is the solution that we've been offering to the market, to investors for the last 2 years. Understandably, given that failure, a good number of people wanted to see evidence, wanted to know that our solution works, perhaps before, being able to believe that Madsen will go again. And so this bulk sample is our offering of that evidence. So we structured the first 15,000 tons of mining as a bulk sample, which is to say, we had independent observers there looking at our in-house model, understanding what we intended to mine, watching us mine it, watching us see how much, assess the tonnage, watching us process it, and then run the numbers. And so now we can put out this set of results. We did just this morning put out this set of results that compares what we thought we were going to mine in each spot that we went to for the bulk sample with what we actually mined. And those numbers are tonnage and gold grade in each place versus what we actually got. And the goal here is to get them perfectly aligned, because perfect alignment means that the work we did to build the accurate model enabled us to deliver exactly what we expected. It's all working. And that's what we did. We put out news today that is about as strong a set of reconciliation results as you could ever expect from a high grade deposit, because and so we were literally almost exactly on the mark. And so it's really gratifying for the team and for everybody on site who's been doing all the work. And now I'm just keen to get out there and help everybody understand that this set of results validates our entire approach. And the thesis here is that if you can unlock Madsen, there's a lot of value there that was hidden away behind a previous failure. And if you can unlock it, then that's the potential for the investor.
Right. Okay. So this is confirmatory of your work so far, your thinking, and does not change anything in terms of going forward. Because I think that people are looking to is this project getting into production. That's the kind of critical path for us. So what are the kind of obstacles to doing that in terms of the de-risking that you've been doing from a technical permitting standpoint, and obviously operations on the ground? Is this thing going to be producing when you said it would?
Yeah, that's the exciting thing. And I mean, that's the next point in the investment argument, is that now that we've done this, and a lot of times when companies do a bulk sample, there's then a long delay before they actually go into production, because they're still building the mine, or they're still permitting, or whatever it might be. That's not our situation. This is just the first 15,000 tons of mining. When we finished mining the bulk sample, we did not stop mining. We continued mining. We've been stockpiling that material. We're continuing to do that stockpiling right now, so that when we turn this mine on, which we expect to do in only, a few weeks, we will have a month's worth of stockpile sitting beside the mill. That's what you always want to have at any mine, the just in case stockpile. And then we'll be ready to go. So we're right on track. This confirms we've been delivering all the things that we said we were going to do pretty much on time for the last 2 years. I'd say this bulk sample confirms that all of those things were the right things to do. And now, now we're just lined up to do it, to turn it on properly, which we have always said we would do by the middle of 2025. And so that means it's sometime in the next few weeks.
Right. Well, I look, as a case of show me the money, Gwen, because that's what's kind of been getting markets excited. Companies in production, or in near-term production, in your case, weeks away. We want to see that, but I also want to set expectations. There's we need a dose of realism here, make sure people don't get disappointed. What's the ramp up look like from that production over those next, say, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, for sure. So our first mining goal, goal at the Madsen mine is to mine and process 800 tons per day. And we expect to turn this thing on in a few weeks at about 600 tons per day, and then ramp up in the second half of the year through that additional 200 tons per day. And that's just a matter of making sure that our crews ramp up underground, increase their pace underground as needed to go from 600 tons consistently of ore coming out of the mine every day to 800 tons. That's the effort that's going to be needed for that ramp up. And then it's important for people to also understand that our mill can go beyond 800 tons per day. It's an 1,100 ton per day mill. So we set our first goal at 800 tons per day. Let's accomplish that. And then let's continue the effort. Let's see if we can ramp up beyond that. And we believe that we can, so that we can just keep ramping up from there. But first things first, let's get it turned on. Let's ramp up to 800 tons per day. And then sometime near the end of the year, that will be the requirement to call it commercial production. Then we can start reporting costs and, giving people that complete, really full, fleshed in picture of what we're doing. But that's not going to be the end point. That's sort of going to be just the beginning for Madsen. There's lots of things that we think. So getting going is a really exciting thing to do.
Okay, so I mean, I just wanted to quickly get into the show me the money bit, because I think that's the bit that people are rightly super excited about. But just in terms of the bulk sample program, in terms of being able to ensure kind of that production and feed into the mill, was there anything that kind of came out of that bulk sampling that you learned about the ability or not to be able to hit those numbers?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say there was any. Okay, let me put my answer into sort of two baskets. One basket is that the entire process of doing a bulk sample has been incredibly valuable. So we're not at a position now where we're like, okay, we're going to turn the mine on, and we're not trying to go from 0 to 100 in one moment. Because that's a really hard thing to do. Mines are very complicated, and trying to go from 0 to 100 overnight, that's a big challenge. So one part of the answer is that the test mining process, turning on the mill, using the mill to process the bulk sample, and figuring out answering all the little questions that arose during that has been super valuable. And it puts us in a much stronger position to operate successfully when we go into production. So that's, lots of small things that, you trip up against, you realize that you tripped, you figure out the problem, and you solve them. That's what it is to run a complicated operation. And so we've been doing that over the last few months while we've done this bulk sample. The other basket for the answer is that overall, the success of the bulk sample says that our workflow doesn't need any changes. It is exactly what this mine needs. So we can continue to work on, all of the details of the mill, and like there's details, equipment availability, and, personnel, assignments. There's lots of details that can be improved and made more efficient. And that's a constant goal in a mine. But the big picture of how we're operating this thing is validated. So those are the two sides of that answer.
Right. And with regards to, you need to kind of statistically significant amount, to which kind of create this data, because you look at the kind of overall grade of 5.72 versus 5.68 predicted, etc. How do you view that, and how do you view the kind of the sort of estimation techniques used on the resource model, for instance? We've also seen sort of underperformance over in McVeigh. So I'm just interested in like how much attention should we pay to the nuanced detail of the reconciliation in terms of the consistency across stopes, or is this just a good validation that it broadly kind of hits what you thought you were going to see?
I'd say both are valid things to look at. And so what I mean there is you can pull on each, and we internally have dived as deep as possible into each stope, and trying to understand. We want to pull as much information as we can from this exercise. That's the reason to do it. And so there's lots of, so for those who are the type to dive deep into these things, they'll notice that the McVeigh reconciliation was the weakest, still like within 7%, but it was the weakest of the reconciliations. Now, the context for that is there's two important pieces of information that should surround that. One is that McVeigh is by far the smallest portion of the resource, right? Austin and South Austin are far larger, and our reconciliations there were stronger. So that's one thing. The other thing is that McVeigh is geologically the most complicated part of this deposit. It's the area that just over the millennia has been refolded and remobilized the most. So it is it's the most complicated gold system. And I wish that our reconciliation had ended with us 7% above instead of 7% below. But I would say that if we did several more similar bulk samples in McVeigh, that we would end up going on either side of that back and forth, because that's what grade variability does, right? And so how could we improve the reconciliation at McVeigh? Well, we could tighten the drill spacing even more. But then you get into this balance of like, okay, well, how much time and cost are we going to put into, are we going to do 5-meter centers? Are we mining this thing with drill holes, right? Like it starts to get towards that. And at the end of the day, our workflow is creating very strong reconciliation for the majority of our deposit, for the area that we know is the most geologically complex, but is also really small relative to the rest. The reconciliation isn't perfect, but we believe that we're going to go above and below because of the grade variability there. McVeigh has some really hot gold intercepts in it as well. So that's what feeds that belief of mine. So yeah, that's the detail. For those who don't dive into the details, I think that looking at the total, just the overall result, conveys the important message, which is that it worked. The workflow works. We're going to be able to mine this thing.
Okay, so obviously, I think what we're saying is there's no need to kind of adjust grade control protocols or block model inputs. This is kind of what you'd expect to see. I think the other thing that is happening, obviously, gold price is doing everyone a favor, and I think that you've kind of updated the gold price. Have you here?
Yeah, so the gold price comment, and we had a quote in there from Shane that sort of referenced that. And what's important for people to understand there is anybody who's putting a mine into production will do like a pre-feasibility study or a feasibility study, and then they'll make the construction decision or whatever the operation decision. And then there's another layer of work that happens. There's the definition drilling, and then there's the detailed engineering. That's how it always goes. And the detailed engineering is much more detailed, and it's right before the mining happens. And that, of course, is an economic exercise, right? You engineer your mine to do so that you can maximize the money that you make, the economic extraction, right? And so our engineers at the mine site have to use a gold price when they're doing that. And so they're using a gold price that's a bit below the long-term consensus gold price. Now, the long-term consensus gold price is about $23.50 right now. And so we're using a number a bit below that. But when you use that gold price to design your stopes, those come out with some different stopes than the engineers of the pre-feasibility study came out with, because they used a gold price of only $1,680. And so $1,680 hurdle, like if a stope has to make sense at $1,680, you're constraining yourself to the highest grade stuff, because that's just what works at that gold price. If you breathe a little, if you boost that gold price to 2,200, somewhere in that sort of range, all of a sudden, this small lens of high grade and this small lens of high grade often end up joining, because there is lower grade mineralization that's surrounding both of them, and it costs less per ton to mine a bigger stope, and you're pulling more tons. And those tons, you're not just mining them for the lower cost, you're mining them because they make money, because you've already gotten in there. You've already driven the tunnel to get over to this area. So just take the additional tons while you're there. So that's where the gold price really is constantly in play in mine engineering. So yeah, that's absolutely something that's going on a daily basis at Madsen, and it is shifting the scale of our stopes larger, and it is, creating a mine that is, we only did long hole stoping, which is the wider, the not quite so selective mining method. We only did long hole stoping in our bulk sample. We only have long hole stoping in our current 18-month mine plan, versus the pre-feasibility study that was 60% cut and fill, the really selective mining method. So there is, the gold price matters, and you can just, a gold price like we have now, or somewhere in the ballpark of what we have now, means that you can take more of the meat that's on the bone at Madsen, which is exciting for us, for sure.
Yeah, obviously this new price that you're using obviously will allow you to kind of change the shape of the stopes, which is great, and it's going to affect dilution and recovery positively, because that's the kind of economic trade-off that you're making there. What does it do in terms of, is it going to add any more time? Because obviously new stope shapes will mean you need to look at things like structural integrity and stability, etc. Does it delay anything, or is that no? Okay.
No, it doesn't delay anything, because this isn't like we're now starting a process of engineering these stopes. We've been engineering these stopes since we started definition drilling. It's an ongoing workflow. You do the definition drilling, you update the in-house resource model, you send it to the engineers, they engineer the stope. That's the constant feedback workflow that's going on at the mine. So our 18-month detailed mine plan, stope engineered mine plan, has been doing this. And sure, we'll go back. There's a little bit of rejigging that goes back right before a stope is about to be sent to the miners. But once the work is done, you can toggle things slightly. So no, it doesn't delay anything. This is the reality of what it is to run a mine.
Okay. And then what about obviously going for like the long holes, the preferred methods, but is there still opportunity for a cut and fill in there?
I'm sure there will be places where we do some cut and fill, because there will be places where, I don't know, there's a historic stope right here and there's a historic stope right here, but we realize that there's some like lovely chunk of really nice grade mineralization right here, and that requires cut and fill. Sure, we'll go in and do that. So for sure, we're not going to ignore the cut and fill options, but we'll prefer long hole for the fact that it's half the mining cost per ton versus cut and fill.
Okay, and with regards to kind of the geotechnical data that your stope geotechnical data that you gather, I mean, what are you gathering in terms of this kind of real-time process of whilst mining, and how does it affect the kind of engineers' thinking as the project moves forward?
There's a couple layers to that answer. First of all, in general, the rocks that we're mining in at Madsen are really competent. They're really strong, competent rocks. So thankfully, geotechnical issues, obviously we're always aware of geotechnical requirements, but they're not dominant in how we have to approach things. That's really competent rock. You're just always, you're constantly gathering that data and you're constantly incorporating it. But it is not really an impediment in our stope design, the geotechnical. There are a few spots in Madsen where there's this other kind of rock called the ultramafic that comes in, which is a weaker kind of rock, but they're like small sills that will like come into a spot here and come in here, but they're infrequent. And so, yeah, you just have to be aware of those. And in general, where you get those ultramafics, you get really nice mineralization right around them. And so it's worth the bit of extra bolting and support that you have to do to mine through those areas. So it's kind of like the engineering of the stopes for a reasonably current gold market. So is engineering of the stopes for the rocks that you're in. It's just a constant ongoing process.
Right, and just in terms of the, I guess what's going to be interesting, and you'll learn as you go along, obviously with the ore handling, sampling, etc. But start with sampling actually. With things like the muck sampling method, it was I guess designed to mitigate risk from the nugget effect and sample bias, etc. But how was that designed, and did it work?
Yeah. So, I mean, the sampling protocol, we have an entire handbook of sampling protocol for the Madsen mine. And so, and this is how the geologic model, like you start with the resource estimate and then it gets improved with increasing data points several times over before the very final stope design. So it obviously gets the definition drilling, which is really useful. And then as you tunnel over to the area, then you probably get the opportunity to do some sampling, some chip wall sampling. As you do the sills above and below, as you're getting ready to mine, you can wall sample, you can sample the muck from those sills. And then as you're mining, you're also sampling the ore. And you have very defined protocols for how all of that sampling happens, where it happens. Like if you have a scoop that picks up a bucket load of ore, there's it's called a 5 dice pattern. So like the 5 on a dice, that's how you sample in the muck bucket. So there's a lot of rigor a lot of structure that goes into how the sampling happens. Humans are still humans. There's probably still some bias in there, and you just have to be aware of that. But you try to reduce the impact of the bias by having some pretty rigorous protocols around it.
Essentially, for the 5 dice method. Okay, I have to look that up. So what about things like bucket volumes versus truckload weights and margin of error for stope tonnage, etc. I mean that's kind of what I'd love to kind of get into, but and also understand. But maybe I'll stick with more simpler matters, which is things with coming back to that kind of ore handling side of things, which is did you any issues encountered with kind of ore loss or overbreak or stockpile contamination during the kind of surface handling?
Yeah, so no, not in particular.
Okay.
We learned in the mining process some things about mining, which is good. Some stopes didn't break exactly where you wanted them to, and so then you have to amend your plant, right? I always say to my daughter, when something doesn't work exactly the way you want it to, you got to figure out what to do next, right? And so that's mining too. So for sure, that's normal in mining, I would say. And then in terms of like how you estimate tonnages, like you were saying, you do multiple ways of estimating tonnage. So you do a CMS, a cavity survey, which is like, think of it as like laser beams, literally, measuring the size of the cavity that you pulled the ore out of. And then because you know what the specific gravity is, the density of your rock, then that's one way of estimating the tonnage that you pulled out of that area. And then of course there's a whole series of weightometers as material goes into the mill. So then you usually also use a drone to survey the stockpile. So there's quite a few checks along the way so that you can be very aware of how much you mined and if there's any losses and how that's all going. And of course, the way to manage losses is to reduce the rehandling of material as much as possible. So the fewer drop and reloads that you can do, the more of your ore you're going to carry successfully into the mill. And so these are all of the details that matter if you want to have a highly effective mine. And so that again, ramp up is a lot about like, okay, let's pay attention to this detail. That over the next few days, let's really focus the teams on this detail and make sure they've got that going. Okay, now let's focus the teams on this detail and make sure that we're doing that perfectly. That's a big part of what ramp up is.
Okay, that's interesting. Like I say, I guess the more you know, the more you know. So yeah, we look forward to sort of hearing all about that. Um, just sticking with the kind of on the so moving to the kind of met component. Obviously, previously recovery rates were high; they were very good. I can't quite remember the distribution between gravity and CIP, for instance, but what do you understand now in terms of the kind of variability of the kind of Austin, South Austin, McVeigh, and I guess how do you plan to kind of improve recovery rates going forward?
Yeah, so there's almost no metallurgical variability between the geologically. They look the same. The rock looks the same when you pull it out. Um, and the mill, we got 95% recovery out of our mill, which is right on line with what it had done for the prior operator. So yeah, there's again, milling is about tweaking, and there's always little things that you can do with this level of reagent or this duration of leach cycle or this how you pour this gold bar. So you're always tweaking the details to try and maximize. So maybe we can squeeze another % out of the mill. I feel like we probably can. This is only our first kick at it. So I feel like we can squeeze another % out of the mill, and they will want to do that. So again, ramp up is right. We did a huge chunk of work. Now we got to make sure that all that we've squeezed, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but if we've perfected, maybe that's a better word to use, like all those little details.
Okay, interesting. And just sort of coming back to the bulk sample in terms of how you feed that data into the 18-month mine plan and projected cash flows, I don't imagine it's going to change much.
No, it doesn't change much. Exactly. That's the whole point.
Right.
The 18-month mine plan, we couldn't possibly wait for the bulk sample to be done to start building that because we plan to start mining this thing soon. We are mining it right now and generating our stockpile. So yeah, it just carries on through and nothing changes.
Right. Okay. Well, I think the good news of the day is that you deliver the bulk sample reconciliation. It's confirmed what you thought. I know you guys put a lot of hard work into this so far, and I'm quite frankly looking forward to gold coming out the other end. Not too long to wait.
2,500 tons of gold out of this bulk sample.
Yeah,
well,
this is true. Do you know we should talk about that? So 2,500.
Yeah, I'm rounding slightly, but yeah, I think it was 24.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of money there.
Yeah,
it definitely pays its way.
I think I'm going to do a news release soon, tomorrow, the next day, that just tells everybody what the exact number was, because I don't know exactly the realized price that we got for every single ounce, and there was a bit of a delay in that. But as soon as I have that, I'll just put out a news release because people are curious. Oh, I mean, it's above 8 million US. It's in that sort of range is what we got, is what we generated from this bulk sample exercise in revenue. So I'll take it. I mean, not personally.
I'll take it. Well, I'd love to take it, but it's good news, not insignificant, shall we say? Do you come back on? So not too many more sleeps before we're getting into production. So I think the market is looking at that, and looking forward to hearing more from you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if anybody's following the story, you can expect a pretty heavy news flow over the next while. We'll always, it would be no surprise to anyone to say that there's another set of definition drill results coming out soon, because they always come out about every 6 weeks, and it's been about 6 weeks. And importantly, we did at the end of February put out one of the highest grade drill results that we've ever done at the Madsen mine, which is in South Austin. The next set that's coming out is in the area that's following up from that really high grade area, which is so that I'm looking forward to being able to put those out to market. And then, we are heading towards production, and there's lots that we can say as we get towards that really important milestone. So yeah, if you're interested in the stock, expect to hear a lot from us over the next little while.